Commander Zekthar stood at the observation deck of the Galactic Military Academy, his four eyes scanning the training grounds below with barely concealed disgust. The newest batch of recruits stumbled through basic combat drills, their movements clumsy and uncoordinated. Among them, one figure stood out for all the wrong reasons. The human. Zekthar's mandibles clicked in disapproval as he watched the pale, bipedal creature struggle to keep up with even the weakest alien cadets. The human's name was Marcus Chen according to his files, and he represented everything wrong with the Galactic Alliance's new, inclusive recruitment policies. Standing barely 6 feet tall and weighing less than most Corellian younglings, the human looked more like prey than a future soldier. "Sir, the human completed the obstacle course," reported Lieutenant Vex, a scaled reptilian officer who served as Zekthar's aide. "In what time?" Zekthar's voice carried the grinding undertone typical of his rocky silicate species. 47 minutes and 12 seconds. "Sir." Zekthar's stone-like features somehow managed to convey even more disdain. The course record was held by a Corellian at 8 minutes flat. Most decent recruits finished in 15 to 20 minutes. Even the weakest usually managed it in 30. Pathetic. Zekthar muttered, his massive frame turning away from the window. At nearly 10 feet tall and built like a living mountain, he dwarfed most species in the academy. His people, the silicates, were natural warriors. Their rock-hard skin could deflect plasma bolts, their strength could crush steel, and their endurance was legendary. They had been the backbone of galactic military forces for over 3 centuries, and now they were expected to serve alongside this. Down in the training yard, Marcus Chen collapsed against a wall, his chest heaving as he gulped down water from a hydration pack. Sweat poured down his face and his simple gray training uniform was soaked through. Around him, other cadets barely seemed winded. A group of towering Corellians, bear-like humanoids with natural armor plating, laughed among themselves as they passed. "Hey, mammal!" called out one of them, a particularly large specimen named Gorak. "Maybe you should try the cooking classes instead. I hear they need someone to peel vegetables," the other Corellians rumbled with amusement. Marcus looked up but said nothing, simply taking another sip of water. This only seemed to encourage them. "What's wrong? Can't understand galactic standard?" Gorak stepped closer, his massive shadow falling over the human. "Or maybe your tiny brain just processes things slowly?" Marcus finally stood, and the size difference was almost comical. Even hunched over, Gorak stood nearly 9 feet tall, his natural armor gleaming under the artificial suns. Marcus barely reached his chest. "I understand you just fine," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "Oh, it speaks." Gorak's friends laughed harder. "Tell me, little mammal, what exactly do you think you're doing here?" "This is a military academy, not a petting zoo." From the observation deck, Zekthar watched the confrontation unfold. Part of him hoped the human would simply give up and leave. It would save everyone the embarrassment of watching him fail spectacularly during actual combat training. The Galactic Alliance's decision to admit humans had been controversial from the start. Their homeworld, Earth, had only recently made contact with galactic civilization, and their species was woefully unprepared for military service. Humans had no natural armor, no enhanced strength, no special abilities that set them apart. They were, by all measurable standards, one of the weakest species ever to seek admission to the Academy. The fact that they had somehow convinced the Alliance Council to grant them a trial membership was nothing short of miraculous, or perhaps just political maneuvering. "Should we intervene, sir?" Lieutenant Vex asked, noting the growing crowd around the confrontation. "Let it play out," Zekthar replied coldly. "The human needs to learn his place." Back in the yard, Gorak had moved even closer to Marcus, close enough that the human had to crane his neck to look up at him. The Corellian's breath smelled like sulfur and raw meat. "You know what I think?" Gorak continued. "I think you're going to wash out before the week is over. I think you'll run crying back to your little dirt ball of a planet, telling everyone how the big scary aliens were mean to you." Marcus remained silent, but something in his eyes had changed. Where before there had been exhaustion and perhaps a hint of doubt, now there was something else, something harder. "Nothing to say?" Gorak reached out with one massive paw, intending to shove the human backwards. "Come on, at least try to—" The words died in his throat as Marcus moved. It wasn't particularly fast by galactic standards, but it was precise. The human stepped slightly to the side, grabbed Gorak's extended arm, and used the Corellian's own momentum against him. Gorak found himself suddenly off balance, stumbling forward as Marcus guided his fall. The massive alien crashed to the ground with a sound like breaking stone, his armor scraping against the training yard's surface. For a moment, everyone stood in stunned silence. Gorak wasn't hurt. His natural armor protected him from far worse than a simple fall, but his pride was severely damaged. "You little..." Gorak started to rise, his face dark with fury. "Combat training ends at 1700 hours, Marcus said calmly, checking his wrist communicator. "It's 1701. I believe that makes this a personal matter, not a training exercise." The implication was clear. If Gorak wanted to continue this, it would have to be outside the official training structure. That meant personal combat, which came with its own set of rules and consequences. Gorak hesitated, suddenly aware that several instructors had appeared around the edges of the training yard. From above, Zekthar found himself leaning forward slightly. The human's movement had been unexpected, crude perhaps, but effective. And more importantly, the little creature had shown no fear even when facing an opponent who could literally tear him apart. "Interesting," he murmured. Lieutenant Vex looked surprised. "Sir?" "Nothing." Zekthar straightened, his expression returning to its usual stern mask. "Continue monitoring the recruits. I want daily reports on their progress." As he walked away from the observation deck, Zekthar found his thoughts returning to the human, Marcus Chen. The file had mentioned some sort of military background from his homeworld, but the details were classified above his clearance level. Most species shared their military traditions openly. The Corellians bragged about their warrior culture. The reptilians spoke proudly of their tactical academies, and his own people celebrated their fortress worlds. But humans, their military history was notably absent from their cultural exchange documents. Curious. Perhaps the little mammal might prove more interesting than he had initially thought. Though that didn't change the fundamental facts. Humans were physically weak, technologically primitive, and completely unprepared for real galactic warfare. Still, as Zekthar made his way to his quarters, he couldn't quite shake the image of Marcus Chen's eyes in that moment, before he moved. There had been something there, something that reminded him, oddly enough, of the look veteran soldiers got after they'd seen real combat. But that was impossible. Humans had barely developed spaceflight. What could they possibly know about real war? The Academy's medical bay hummed with the soft sounds of advanced healing technology. Dr. Cassandra, the Academy's chief medical officer, moved between the biobeds with practiced efficiency. Her people, the ethereals, were natural healers. Their translucent blue skin could sense biological irregularities from several feet away, and their six-fingered hands were perfectly designed for delicate medical procedures. She paused at the latest arrival, a Corellian cadet named Gorak, who had been brought in with what appeared to be severe training injuries. His natural armor plating was cracked in several places, and internal scans showed significant bruising to his muscular system. "What happened to this one?" she asked her assistant, a young reptilian named Nurse Vec. "Training accident, doctor. The reports are unclear." Cassandra's large, multifaceted eyes examined the readings more carefully. The pattern of injuries was unusual. Corellians were built like living tanks. Their training rarely resulted in anything more serious than minor scrapes. Yet Gorak showed signs of impact trauma consistent with being thrown against a solid surface. "Has he regained consciousness?" "Briefly, doctor. He kept mumbling something about impossible and just a human. The sedatives have kept him under since then." Dr. Cassandra's head tendrils twitched with curiosity. "A human?" She had heard about the new cadet from Earth, though she hadn't yet had the opportunity to examine one of their species. The medical files provided by the human delegation had been surprisingly sparse, containing only basic anatomical information and a few genetic markers. "Doctor?" Nurse Vec's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Should we begin the bone regeneration protocol?" "Yes, but keep it at minimal intensity. I want to speak with him when he wakes." She made a note in Gorak's medical file. "And send a message to Commander Zekthar. He'll want to know about this." 3 hours later, Gorak's eyes fluttered open. The massive Corellian tried to sit up, then immediately regretted it as pain shot through his torso. "Easy." Dr. Cassandra's voice was soothing, carrying the harmonic undertones that her species used to calm patients. "You've suffered significant trauma. The regeneration therapy needs more time to work." "Where?" Gorak's voice was hoarse. "Where am I?" Medical Bay. You were brought in unconscious with multiple fractures and internal bruising.
Can you tell me what happened?
Gorak's memory came flooding back, and with it a mixture of pain and humiliation. The human, he growled. That little freak did something to me. Dr. Cassandra's head tendrils curled with interest. A human did this to you? Cadet Chen? I don't know his name. We were just talking, and then... Gorak struggled to put the experience into words. It happened so fast. 1 second I was standing, the next I was flying through the air. I hit the training equipment so hard I blacked out. The doctor's multifaceted eyes widened. According to her scans, Gorak weighed nearly 800 pounds and stood over 9 feet tall. For a human, a species that averaged perhaps 200 pounds and 6 feet in height, to throw him with such force seemed physically impossible. Are you certain it was the human who... Of course I'm certain. Gorak's voice rose, then he winced as the movement aggravated his injuries. I was right there. He grabbed my arm and suddenly I was airborne. It doesn't make sense. Dr. Cassandra pulled up the human anatomical files on her medical tablet. According to the data, humans possessed standard mammalian musculature with no apparent enhancements. Their bone density was actually below galactic average, and their strength-to-weight ratio was unremarkable. Yet somehow one of them had hospitalized a Corellian warrior. I need to run some additional scans, she told Gorak. Something about this isn't adding up. As she worked, her mind raced with possibilities. Could the human medical files be incomplete? Were there biological factors that their species hadn't disclosed? Or was there something else entirely at play? The medical bay doors hissed open, and Commander Zekthar strode in, his massive frame making even the spacious facility feel cramped. His 4 eyes immediately focused on the injured Corellian. Report, he commanded in his gravelly voice. Dr. Cassandra gestured to her scans. Cadet Gorak suffered multiple impact fractures and severe bruising. The injury pattern suggests he was thrown with considerable force against the training equipment. He claims a human cadet was responsible. Zekthar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. I witnessed the initial confrontation. The human used some sort of leverage technique, but I didn't see what happened afterward. Commander, with respect, that's impossible. Dr. Cassandra highlighted the relevant data on her tablet. Based on standard biomechanical analysis, a human shouldn't possess sufficient strength to generate this level of trauma against a Corellian. The mass differential alone makes it highly improbable. Yet here we are. Zekthar replied dryly. He studied Gorak's unconscious form. What else do you know about human physiology? Very little, I'm afraid. Their medical delegation provided only basic information. Standard mammalian biology, carbon-based oxygen breathing. Nothing remarkable. She paused. Though I did notice some gaps in their documentation. What kind of gaps? Well, for instance, they provided detailed information about their circulatory and respiratory systems, but almost nothing about their muscular development or stress response mechanisms. And their neurological data is minimal. Zekthar's 4 eyes narrowed. In his experience, species that were secretive about their biological capabilities usually had good reasons. Doctor, I want you to request a full medical examination of the human cadet. Standard protocol for all new recruits. Of course, Commander. Though I should mention, human medical privacy laws may complicate things. According to their cultural briefing, they're quite protective of personal medical information. Then make it voluntary. Appeal to his desire to integrate with Academy life. Zekthar turned to leave, then paused. And, Doctor? I want those results kept confidential until we understand what we're dealing with. After the commander left, Dr. Cassandra returned her attention to Gorak, who had drifted back into sedated sleep. She ran her 6-fingered hands over the scanner, studying the injury patterns once more. The fractures were clean, suggesting a single massive impact rather than prolonged combat. The bruising patterns indicated that Gorak had been accelerated rapidly before hitting the obstacle. But how? She pulled up training facility schematics and calculated the distance between where the confrontation had occurred and where Gorak had been found. 15 feet. The Corellian had been thrown 15 feet through the air and impacted with enough force to crack his armor-like skin. Her medical training told her it was impossible. A creature with Marcus Chen's apparent physical specifications simply couldn't generate that kind of force. Yet the evidence was undeniable. She made a note to research human combat techniques in the Academy's database. Perhaps their species had developed leverage-based fighting methods that compensated for their physical limitations. Though even then, the physics didn't quite work out. As she worked late into the station's night cycle, Dr. Cassandra found herself growing more curious about the mysterious human cadet. Tomorrow, she would extend an invitation for a voluntary medical examination. Perhaps a closer look at human biology would explain how Marcus Chen had accomplished the impossible. What she didn't know was that in the human delegation's classified files far above her security clearance, there were detailed reports about humanity's long history of warfare. Reports that mentioned something called adrenaline response and combat conditioning. Reports that described a species that could, under the right circumstances, perform far beyond their apparent physical limitations. Reports that might have explained why Marcus Chen's eyes had held that particular look, the look of someone who had seen real violence and learned to master it. But those files remained locked away, and Dr. Cassandra was left to puzzle over the mystery of how something so apparently weak could prove so surprisingly dangerous. Marcus Chen sat in the Academy's mess hall, methodically eating his meal while trying to ignore the stares from nearby tables. Word had spread quickly about Gorak's hospitalization, and with it came whispers and speculation. Some cadets looked at him with newfound wariness, others with outright disbelief. A few seemed almost amused by the whole situation. The human picked at his protein synthesis cake, a standard Academy meal that supposedly provided optimal nutrition for all known species. To him, it tasted like cardboard mixed with artificial flavoring. But he'd eaten worse during his time in Earth's Special Forces. Much worse. Mind if I sit? Marcus looked up to see a tall, elegant figure approaching. Dr. Cassandra moved with the fluid grace typical of ethereals, her translucent blue skin seeming to glow softly in the mess hall's lighting. Her large, multifaceted eyes studied him with obvious curiosity. "Of course, Doctor." Marcus gestured to the empty seats across from him. "Though I should warn you, sitting with me seems to be socially hazardous lately." Dr. Cassandra's head tendrils curled in what Marcus had learned was the ethereal equivalent of a smile. "I think I can handle the risk. I'm more interested in biology than politics." She settled gracefully into the chair, her six-fingered hands folding neatly on the table. "I wanted to discuss your recent encounter with Cadet Gorak." Marcus paused mid-bite. "Is he all right?" "He'll recover fully. Corellian physiology is remarkably resilient." Her voice carried the harmonic undertones that made ethereal speech so distinctive. "What I find puzzling is the nature of his injuries. I'm not sure I understand. The force required to cause his trauma pattern should have been far beyond the capabilities of..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Beyond what our medical files suggest human physiology can produce." Marcus set down his utensil and met her gaze steadily. "What exactly are you asking, Doctor?" "I'm asking if you would consent to a voluntary medical examination. Standard procedure for new recruits, but given the unusual circumstances, I thought a personal request might be more appropriate." The mess hall continued its low buzz of conversation around them, but Marcus felt as though a spotlight had suddenly focused on their table. He had known this moment would come eventually. Earth's delegation had been very specific about what information to share and what to keep classified. What would this examination involve? Basic physiological scans, muscle density measurements, reflexive response testing. Nothing invasive, I assure you. I'm simply trying to understand how your species has adapted to your homeworld's conditions." Marcus considered his options. Refusing would only generate more suspicion, but agreeing meant revealing capabilities that Earth preferred to keep secret. On the other hand, some of his abilities were bound to become apparent during advanced training anyway. "All right," he said finally. "When would you like to schedule it?" "This afternoon, if you're available. It shouldn't take more than an hour." 3 hours later, Marcus found himself in one of the medical bay's examination rooms. Wearing a standard diagnostic gown while Dr. Cassandra prepared her equipment. The room was sterile and white, filled with devices he didn't recognize but which hummed with obvious sophistication. "Let's start with basic measurements," Dr. Cassandra said, activating a scanning array. "Please stand in the center circle." Marcus complied and immediately felt the subtle tingle of energy passing through his body. Holographic displays lit up around the room, showing three-dimensional representations of his internal structure. Fascinating, the doctor murmured, studying the readouts. Your bone density is actually quite remarkable for a mammalian species. And your muscle fiber composition. She leaned closer to one of the displays. These are fast-twitch fibers, aren't they? Designed for explosive movement rather than sustained activity. I wouldn't know, Marcus replied honestly. I'm not a medical expert. Dr. Cassandra continued her scans, her head tendrils twitching with increasing interest. The human's cardiovascular system showed signs of extensive conditioning, with a heart that was proportionally larger than indicated in the basic files. His nervous system displayed unusual density in certain regions, particularly those associated with reflexive responses and spatial awareness. Cadet Chen, may I ask about your background? Your file mentions previous military service on Earth. Marcus hesitated. I served in my planet's armed forces, yes. In what capacity? Various roles. Security, reconnaissance, some combat operations. It was a carefully neutral answer that revealed nothing, while being technically truthful. Dr. Cassandra noted his reluctance but pressed on with the examination. I'm going to test your reflexive responses now. I'll activate some mild stimuli, flashing lights, sudden sounds, and measure your reaction times. The next series of tests revealed data that made Dr. Cassandra's eyes widen. Marcus's reflexes were far faster than the human baseline suggested in their species files. More than that, his responses showed clear signs of combat conditioning, automatic threat assessment, optimized defensive positioning, and reaction patterns that spoke of extensive training. Your response times are extraordinary, she said, reviewing the data. Almost twice as fast as our files suggest is normal for your species. Maybe I'm just naturally quick. Dr. Cassandra's head tendrils curled skeptically. Perhaps. Now I'd like to test your strength parameters. Please grip this measurement device as firmly as you can. Marcus took the device, which looked like a sophisticated version of the grip strength testers he remembered from Earth fitness evaluations. He squeezed steadily, watching Dr. Cassandra's expression change as the numbers climbed. That's significantly above the expected range, she said, making notes on her tablet. Let's try a different approach. I'm going to simulate a stress scenario and monitor your biological responses. What kind of stress scenario? Nothing dangerous. Simply some environmental changes. Dimmed lighting, unexpected noises, temperature fluctuations. I want to observe how your body adapts. The examination room's lights dimmed to nearly nothing, and the temperature dropped several degrees. Speakers hidden in the walls began producing random sounds, footsteps, voices, mechanical noises. Dr. Cassandra watched her instruments intently as Marcus stood calmly in the center of the room. What she saw made her question everything. She thought she knew about human biology. Marcus's heart rate had actually decreased rather than increased. His muscle tension shifted subtly but efficiently, optimizing for quick movement in multiple directions. His breathing became shallower and more controlled. Most remarkably, his brain activity showed patterns consistent with heightened awareness without stress response. These were not the reactions of someone experiencing anxiety or discomfort. These were the reactions of a predator evaluating a hunting ground. Fascinating, she whispered. Then louder. You can relax now, Cadet. The test is complete. The lights returned to normal, and Marcus's posture shifted back to its casual stance. But Dr. Cassandra had seen enough. Whatever humans truly were, they were not the weak, primitive mammals their files suggested. Doctor? Marcus's voice interrupted her thoughts. Is everything all right? Yes, of course, just recording the data. She set down her tablet and studied him directly. Cadet Chen, I hope you don't mind me asking, but your homeworld, Earth, what is it like? Marcus considered the question. Diverse. Beautiful in places. Harsh in others. And the life there? Dangerous? A slight smile played at the corners of Marcus's mouth. You could say that. Earth is competitive. Everything there evolved to survive against everything else. It's not a gentle world. Dr. Cassandra felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. And humans? Where do they fit in this competitive environment? Marcus's smile widened slightly, and for just a moment she caught a glimpse of something in his eyes that made her understand why Gorak had ended up in her medical bay. We're apex predators, Doctor. We didn't climb to the top of our food chain by being weak. The words were spoken quietly, almost casually, but they carried an undertone that made Dr. Cassiandra's healing instincts suddenly scream warnings. She was looking at something far more dangerous than the Academy's files had suggested, something that had evolved not just to survive, but to hunt. And now there were hundreds of them scattered across the galaxy, learning about alien technology and military tactics. "Thank you for your cooperation, Cadet," she managed to say. "I'll have your results processed within a few days." As Marcus left the examination room, Dr. Cassiandra stood alone among her instruments, staring at data that challenged everything the galactic community thought they knew about humanity. She thought about Gorak's injuries, about those impossibly fast reflexes, about the way Marcus had adapted to simulated combat conditions. She thought about a species that had somehow convinced the Galactic Alliance they were weak and harmless while possessing capabilities that could revolutionize military thinking, and she wondered what other secrets the humans were keeping. Commander Zekthar stood in his private office, studying the classified report that had arrived on his secure terminal just an hour ago. The communication bore the highest encryption seals of the Galactic Intelligence Division, and its contents had shaken his fundamental understanding of the new human recruits. Dr. Cassiandra's medical findings were disturbing enough: reflexes that defied human baseline data, stress responses that suggested extensive combat conditioning, and physical capabilities far beyond what their species files indicated. But the intelligence report painted an even more complex picture. Earth, it seemed, was not the peaceful backwater world that humanity claimed. According to deep space reconnaissance, human civilization showed signs of recent and extensive warfare. Orbital debris fields suggested massive space battles within the last century. Planetary scarring indicated the use of weapons that should have been beyond their technological capabilities. Most tellingly, their industrial output was almost entirely focused on military applications, a pattern typically seen only in species actively engaged in galactic-scale conflicts. Yet humanity claimed to be a young, peaceful civilization seeking to join the galactic community for mutual benefit and knowledge sharing. Zekthar's mandibles clicked as he processed the implications. Either humans were remarkably dishonest about their nature and capabilities, or they were survivors of something so terrible they preferred to present themselves as weak rather than reveal their true strength. His contemplation was interrupted by a soft chime from his door communicator. "Enter," he commanded. Lieutenant Vex slithered in, his scaled features showing obvious concern. "Commander, we have a situation developing in Training Complex 7. Zekthar's four eyes focused on his aide. "What kind of situation?" "The human cadet, sir. Cadet Chen has been challenged to formal combat by 3 Corellian seniors. They're claiming he used dishonorable tactics against Gorak and demanding satisfaction according to warrior protocols." Zekthar felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. "When?" "Now, sir." "The challenge was issued 15 minutes ago. Academy regulations require we allow traditional combat resolution between species that practice warrior codes." The commander was already moving toward the door. Academy protocols were clear. Species that maintained formal warrior traditions were permitted to resolve disputes through regulated combat. It was intended to prevent larger conflicts by providing controlled outlets for aggression. Usually it involved well-matched opponents engaging in ritualized fighting with minimal real danger. But 3 veteran Corellian cadets against 1 apparently untrained human was not well matched by any measure. Training Complex 7 was the Academy's largest combat facility, designed to accommodate everything from individual sparring to massive tactical exercises. When Zekthar arrived, he found a crowd of cadets from various species gathered around one of the smaller fighting circles. At the center stood Marcus Chen, looking almost comically small next to his 3 opponents. The Corellians were all senior cadets, veterans of multiple training cycles who would graduate within the year. Each stood over 8 feet tall, their natural armor plating gleaming under the arena lights. Their leader, a massive specimen named Krex, had served as squad leader for his entire class. "Commander," approached Instructor Voss, a grizzled reptilian who oversaw combat training. "I've tried to discourage this, but Cadet Chen accepted the challenge formally. Academy protocols tie my hands." Zekthar nodded grimly. "Weapons?" "None. Traditional unarmed combat until submission or incapacitation." Looking at the size differential, Zekthar couldn't imagine how this would end in anything but disaster for the human. Even with the surprising capabilities Dr. Cassandra had documented, Marcus faced opponents who outweighed him 4-1 and possessed natural weapons in the form of armored fists and reinforced bone structures. Before we begin, Krex's voice boomed across the arena. I want everyone to understand why we're here. This mammal used coward's tricks against my clutch brother Gorak. He struck from stealth and used leverage against an honorable warrior's strength. We're here to prove that such tactics mean nothing against true Corellian might. Marcus said nothing, simply removing his outer training jacket and rolling his shoulders to loosen them. He moved with casual efficiency, but Zekthar noticed how his eyes never stopped tracking the positions of all three opponents. Any last words, human? Krex sneered. Marcus looked up at him calmly. Just one question. Are you sure this is what you want? The Corellians laughed, a rumbling sound like distant avalanches. Krex spread his arms wide, displaying his impressive physique. What could a weak little mammal possibly do to concern warriors like us? Marcus nodded slowly. Fair enough, but don't say I didn't ask. Instructor Voss activated the combat perimeter, creating an energy barrier that would contain the fight while allowing observers to watch safely.
Combat begins in 3, 2, 1, engage!
What happened next would be discussed in academy halls for years to come. Marcus didn't wait for the Corellians to coordinate their attack. Instead, he moved instantly, covering the distance to the nearest opponent in a fluid rush that seemed to blur the line between running and diving. His target, a young Corellian named Vex, barely had time to register the human's approach before Marcus was inside his guard. The human's movements were unlike anything the observers had seen. Where other species relied on strength or natural weapons, Marcus used precision, leverage, and an understanding of anatomy that was almost surgical in its application. His hands found pressure points and nerve clusters with unerring accuracy, while his feet and knees targeted joints and balance points. Vex collapsed in less than 5 seconds, his nervous system temporarily disrupted by strikes to carefully chosen neural pathways. The second Corellian, Gorth, managed to swing his massive fist toward where Marcus had been, but the human was already gone, flowing around the attack like water around a stone. Marcus's counterattack was a series of rapid strikes to Gorth's knee joints and elbow connections, not hard enough to cause permanent damage, but precise enough to disrupt muscle control. Gorth toppled forward, his own weight working against him as his legs refused to support him properly. Krex, the largest and most experienced of the three, finally realized what he was facing. This wasn't a weak mammal stumbling through lucky moves. This was a predator that understood exactly how to dismantle opponents regardless of size advantages. Impossible, Krex breathed, then charged forward with desperate fury. Marcus stood his ground until the last possible moment, then stepped aside and up, using Krex's armored shoulder as a stepping stone to gain height. His hands found the nerve clusters at the base of Krex's thick neck, applying pressure with surgical precision. Krex's charge became a stumble, then a fall, as his voluntary muscle control shut down. He crashed to the arena floor, conscious but completely unable to move. The entire engagement had lasted less than 30 seconds. Silence filled the arena as Marcus stood among 3 incapacitated Corellians, barely breathing hard. His opponents weren't permanently injured. Marcus had been careful about that, but they were effectively helpless until their nervous systems recovered. Medical teams to combat Arena 7. Instructor Voss's voice was carefully controlled as he called for assistance. 3 cadets requiring neural recovery protocols. As medical staff rushed to tend to the fallen Corellians, the crowd of observers began to disperse, their conversations a buzz of disbelief and speculation. Marcus retrieved his training jacket and walked calmly toward the exit. Cadet Chen. Commander Zekthar's voice stopped him. Marcus turned and nodded respectfully. Commander, that was educational. Where did you learn to fight like that? Marcus considered his answer carefully. Earth has many different fighting traditions, sir. I studied several of them. I see. Zekthar's 4 eyes studied the human intently. And these traditions, they're common knowledge on your world. The basics are taught widely, yes, sir. Most humans learn some form of combat skills during their education. The implications of that statement hit Zekthar like a physical blow. If what he'd just witnessed represented basic human combat training, What would their elite warriors be capable of? Carry on, Cadet, he managed. As Marcus left the arena, Zekthar found himself reconsidering everything he thought he knew about humanity. The medical evidence, the intelligence reports, and now this demonstration painted a picture of a species far more formidable than they appeared. A species that had somehow convinced the galaxy they were weak while possessing capabilities that could revolutionize warfare itself, and there were millions of them on their homeworld, all trained in these mysterious fighting arts. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Zekthar wondered if the Galactic Alliance had made a terrible mistake in inviting humanity to join their community. Or perhaps, he thought grimly, humanity had made a mistake in accepting. Admiral Thexura stood before the holographic display in the Galactic Alliance Defense Council chambers, her crystalline form reflecting the blue light of the tactical projections. As one of the few remaining survivors of the Void Wars, she commanded respect from every species in the Alliance. Her people, the Crystallines, had served as strategic advisors for over a millennium, their silicon-based minds capable of processing vast amounts of tactical data simultaneously. Today, however, she was deeply troubled. Explain to me again how 3 trained Corellian combat specialists were defeated by a single human recruit, she said, her harmonic voice carrying undertones of disbelief. Commander Zekthar stood at attention before the council. Around the chamber, representatives from a dozen species watched through holographic projections, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. The human cadet employed fighting techniques unknown to our databases, Zekthar reported. His methods focused on disrupting neural pathways and exploiting anatomical vulnerabilities rather than relying on brute force. Anatomical vulnerabilities? The question came from General Vorth, a massive Corellian whose own species had just been humiliated. You're telling me this mammal knows more about Corellian physiology than our own medical specialists? It appears so, General. The human demonstrated precise knowledge of nerve cluster, locations and pressure points that our own combat instructors weren't aware existed, Admiral. Thexara's form shifted to a deeper blue as she processed this information. Commander Zekthar, have you received the classified intelligence briefing regarding the human homeworld? Yes, Admiral. The orbital debris fields and industrial patterns suggest a civilization with extensive recent warfare experience. More than that, Admiral Thexara manipulated the holographic display, showing long-range sensor data of Earth's solar system. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected energy signatures consistent with antimatter weaponry within the last 50 years. Antimatter weaponry, Commander. That's technology that most Alliance species don't develop until they've been spacefaring for centuries. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. The implications were staggering. There's more, the Admiral continued. Analysis of human communication networks shows military organizational structures that extend to every population center on their planet. What they call police forces carry weapons that would be considered military grade by most species. Their civilian training programs include what they term martial arts, organized fighting systems that appear to be highly developed. Ambassador Kethlon, speaking for the Ethereal Consortium, leaned forward in his projection. Are you suggesting that humanity has been deceptive about their capabilities? I'm suggesting that we may have fundamentally misunderstood what we were accepting into the Alliance, Admiral Thexara replied. Dr. Cassiandra's medical analysis of their recruit shows biological adaptations, consistent with an apex predator species. Yet humans claim to be peaceful explorers seeking knowledge and friendship. General Vorth's armored fist struck the table before him. If they're warriors, why hide it? The Corellians are proud of our combat traditions. The Silicates celebrate their fortress worlds. Why would humans pretend to be weak? That, said a new voice, is exactly what we need to find out. All eyes turned to the newcomer, Director Kessex of the Galactic Intelligence Division. The enigmatic figure appeared only as a shifting shadow in the holographic display, their true form and species classified beyond even Admiral clearance. Director, Admiral Thexara acknowledged. What has your analysis revealed? Troubling patterns. We've intercepted fragments of human historical databases during their cultural exchange transmissions. What we've found suggests that their species has been in a state of near constant warfare for their entire recorded history. Not just tribal conflicts or territorial disputes, organized, technological warfare involving weapons of mass destruction. The chamber fell silent. Furthermore, Director Kessex continued, their arrival in our galaxy coincides with the complete cessation of energy signatures from their home system. No more antimatter detonations, no more military communications, no more orbital construction. Either they achieved perfect peace the moment they made contact with us, or they've consolidated their forces for expansion. Admiral Thexera finished grimly. General Vorth leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. You think they're scouts? Advanced reconnaissance preparing for invasion. It's a possibility we can't ignore. A species that can train their civilian recruits to disable trained. Corellian warriors might have military capabilities that exceed our understanding. Ambassador Kethalon's ethereal features showed concern. If this is true, we've given them access to our most advanced military training, our tactical databases, our defensive positions, and they've spread their personnel across 100 different alliance facilities, Admiral Thexara added. Perfect positioning for coordinated strikes against our command structure. Commander Zekthar found himself speaking, despite the gravity of the situation. Admirals with respect, there may be another explanation. All attention focused on him. Admiral Thexara's crystalline form shifted to an expectant golden hue. Proceed, Commander. What if they're not hiding their capabilities for aggressive purposes? What if they're survivors? The question hung in the air for a long moment. Explain, Director Kessex commanded. Think about it from their perspective. They're a species that's apparently fought wars using antimatter weapons, technology that could sterilize planets. They've developed combat systems that can defeat species with significant physical advantages. They've organized their entire civilization around military preparedness. Zekthar paused, organizing his thoughts. What if they're not conquerors? What if they're refugees from something worse? Worse than antimatter warfare? General Vorth scoffed. What could force a species to develop such capabilities while remaining confined to a single star system? Zekthar pressed. Most civilizations expand outward once they achieve spaceflight. Humans developed advanced weapons and stayed home. Why? Admiral Thexara's form shifted through several color spectrums as she processed the implications. You're suggesting they were fighting a defensive war. Against what? Ambassador Kethalon asked. I don't know, but consider their behavior since joining the Alliance. They've been model recruits, eager to learn, cooperative with other species. Cadet Chen only used force when directly challenged, and even then he was careful not to cause permanent harm. Or he was following orders to maintain their cover, Director Kessex countered. Perhaps, but there's another possibility. Zekthar straightened. What if they're genuinely seeking alliance because they need it? What if humanity developed all these capabilities to survive something they couldn't defeat alone? The chamber erupted in discussion as various representatives began speaking at once. Admiral Thexara raised one crystalline appendage for silence. These are all theories without evidence, she declared. What we need are facts. Director Kessex, I want a full intelligence assessment of the human homeworld. Use every resource at your disposal. Already in progress, Admiral. However, our deep space surveillance is limited. Getting accurate intelligence will require closer reconnaissance. General Vorth, I want increased security protocols at all facilities housing human personnel. Not hostile containment, but enhanced monitoring. Understood. Admiral. And Commander Zekthar, I want you to maintain close observation of this Cadet Chen. If humans are as capable as we suspect, he may be more than a simple recruit. Yes. Admiral. As the council session concluded and the holographic projections faded, Admiral Thexara remained in the chamber, studying the tactical displays. In her 1,000 years of service, she had seen species rise and fall, watched civilizations bloom and crumble, survived wars that had reshaped the galaxy. But she had never encountered a species quite like humanity, apparently weak enough to need protection, yet somehow capable of feats that challenged everything the Alliance thought they knew about combat effectiveness. Were they victims seeking sanctuary, predators in disguise, or something else entirely? The answer to that question might determine the fate of the entire Galactic Alliance. In the depths of space, monitoring stations continued their silent watch over the human home system, recording energy patterns and analyzing every signal that emerged from Earth's vicinity. What they found would soon challenge every assumption the galaxy had made about their newest members. But for now, The mystery of humanity remained unsolved, and Marcus Chen continued his training, unaware that his performance in a simple academy fight had triggered an intelligence crisis that reached the highest levels of galactic government. The truth about humanity was out there, waiting to be discovered. The question was whether the Alliance would like what they found. Dr. Cassandra received the encrypted message at DO 347 station time, jolting her from the meditative state that ethereals used instead of sleep. The communication bore Admiral Thexera's personal seal and contained orders that made her luminescent skin shift to worried purple hues. She was to conduct a comprehensive biological analysis of all human genetic material in the Academy's medical database. More specifically, she was to determine if humans possessed any latent capabilities that might pose a security threat to the Alliance. The timing wasn't coincidental. 3 days had passed since the combat incident in Training Complex 7, and the Academy buzzed with speculation about human capabilities. Some cadets whispered about secret warrior traditions, others suggested technological enhancements, and a few wondered if humans might be something other than they. Appeared Dr. Cassandra, activated her private laboratory's most sophisticated analysis systems and began reviewing every piece of biological data the Academy had collected from human recruits. What she found defied every assumption about mammalian evolution. Human DNA contained sequences that made no sense from a natural development standpoint. Embedded within their genetic structure were coding patterns that suggested artificial enhancement, not recent technological augmentation, but modifications so ancient they had become hereditary. Someone or something had altered human genetics at a fundamental level, and those changes had been passed down through thousands of generations. Even more puzzling were the dormant sequences. Vast sections of human DNA appeared to be inactive, as if waiting for specific triggers to activate. Dr. Cassandra had seen similar patterns in ethereal genetics. Her own species possessed latent abilities that only manifested during extreme stress or specific environmental conditions. But the scope of human dormant genetics was unlike anything in galactic medical literature. A soft chime indicated someone at her laboratory door. Dr. Cassandra quickly secured her research and activated the entry protocol. Marcus Chen stood in the doorway looking somewhat uncomfortable. "Doctor, you asked to see me?" "Yes, Cadet, please come in." She gestured to a chair near her desk. "I have some questions about your medical examination results." Marcus settled into the chair, his movements carrying that subtle efficiency she was beginning to recognize as typically human. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong exactly, unusual." Dr. Cassandra pulled up a simplified version of her analysis on a display screen. "Your genetic structure shows some interesting patterns. I was hoping you could provide some context." Marcus studied the readout with obvious confusion. "Doctor, I'm not a geneticist. I'm not sure how much help I can be. Tell me about human evolutionary history. What do your scientists believe about how your species developed?" "The standard theory is that we evolved from earlier primate species over millions of years. Natural selection, environmental adaptation, the usual process." Marcus paused. "Though there are some gaps in the fossil record that our paleontologists find puzzling." "What kind of gaps?" "Periods where human development seems to have accelerated beyond normal evolutionary timeframes. Sudden increases in brain capacity, changes in bone density, improvements in sensory capability. Our scientists generally attribute it to environmental pressures we don't fully understand." Dr. Cassandra's head tendrils curled with interest. "Environmental pressures? Climate changes, natural disasters, competition with other species?" Marcus shrugged. "Earth's been a dangerous place for a long time. Our early ancestors had to adapt quickly or die out. That explanation might satisfy human scientists, but Dr. Cassandra's medical training recognized something else entirely. The genetic patterns she was seeing suggested directed evolution, deliberate modifications to enhance survival capabilities. Cadet Chen, are you familiar with your planet's ancient history? Mythology, oral traditions, that sort of thing?" Marcus's expression became more guarded. "Some, why do you ask?" "Many species have legends about outside influences on their development. Ancient visitors, divine intervention, genetic gifts from the stars. Do humans have similar stories? Every culture on Earth has myths about gods or advanced beings who influenced early human development." Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. But they're just stories. Primitive attempts to explain things our ancestors couldn't understand. Dr. Cassandra made a note on her tablet. Of course. Just stories. She changed tactics. Tell me about human physical capabilities. In your military service, what was considered exceptional performance? That's classified information, Doctor. The answer came so quickly and firmly that Dr. Cassandra knew she'd touched on something significant. I'm not asking for tactical secrets, Cadet. I'm simply trying to understand human physiological limits for medical purposes. Marcus considered this for a moment. Human performance varies widely depending on training, conditioning, and circumstances. In extreme situations, people can sometimes exceed normal limitations. What kind of extreme situations? Combat stress, life-threatening danger, protecting others. Marcus's eyes had taken on that distant look she'd noticed before. Adrenaline response can enable remarkable feats of strength, speed, and endurance. Adrenaline response? Marcus blinked, seeming to realize he'd said something significant. It's a biochemical reaction to perceived threats. Increases heart rate, dilates blood vessels, enhances muscle performance. Most species probably have something similar, but Dr. Cassandra knew they didn't. No other Alliance species showed the genetic markers for the kind of extreme stress enhancement Marcus was describing. She made another note to research this adrenaline response phenomenon. Thank you for your time, Cadet. I think that covers everything for now. After Marcus left, Dr. Cassandra returned to her genetic analysis with renewed focus. She cross-referenced human DNA patterns with every species in the Alliance medical database, looking for similarities that might explain the anomalies. What she found made her luminescent, skin shift to alarmed silver. Buried deep in human genetic structure were sequences that matched samples from the Void War archives, genetic material, collected from beings that had fought against the Alliance 3,000 years ago, the war that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization, the predecessors. According to historical records, the predecessors had been an ancient species of incredible technological advancement who had attempted to reshape the galaxy according to their vision. They possessed capabilities that seemed almost magical: genetic manipulation, consciousness transfer, matter-energy conversion. The war against them had lasted centuries and cost billions of lives before they simply vanished, leaving behind only ruins and fragmented genetic samples. Now Dr. Cassandra was looking at those same genetic markers in human DNA. Either humans were descended from the predecessors, or the predecessors had modified human genetics before disappearing. Both possibilities carried terrifying implications. If humans were predecessor descendants, then the Alliance had just welcomed the children of their greatest enemy into their midst. If humans had been modified by the predecessors, then they might possess dormant capabilities that could dwarf current galactic technology. Dr. Cassandra encrypted her findings and prepared an emergency transmission to Admiral Thexara. But as she composed the message, one thought kept nagging at her. Marcus Chen had seemed genuinely surprised by her questions about genetic enhancement. Either he was an exceptional actor, or humans themselves didn't know what they really were, which raised another disturbing possibility. What if the predecessors hadn't just modified human genetics? What if they had hidden humanity away, placed them on an isolated world with suppressed memories waiting for the right moment to activate their true capabilities? What if the predecessors hadn't vanished at all? What if they had simply been waiting, growing stronger, preparing for their return? And now their sleeper agents were embedded throughout Alliance military and scientific facilities, learning everything there was to know about current galactic civilization. Dr. Cassandra completed her emergency transmission and sent it through the highest security channels available. Then she activated her laboratory's lockdown protocols and began backing up all her research to secure storage. If she was right about what she'd discovered, the Alliance was about to face a threat far greater than any in recorded history, and they had less than no time to prepare. In the depths of space, monitoring stations continued their watch over Earth's solar system. But now they were looking for different things: signs of predecessor technology, evidence of ancient capabilities reawakening, proof that humanity's peaceful facade concealed the return of the galaxy's greatest nightmare. The evidence was building, pattern by pattern, clue by clue. The predecessors were coming back, and they looked exactly like the harmless mammals seeking friendship and knowledge from the Galactic Alliance. The emergency session of the Galactic Defense Council convened in absolute secrecy aboard the fortress station Nexus Prime. Admiral Thexara's crystalline form had shifted to deep red as she addressed the assembled representatives, her harmonic voice carrying undertones of barely controlled alarm. Directors, generals, ambassadors, what I'm about to share with you will challenge everything we thought we knew about the human species and may represent the gravest threat our alliance has ever faced. The holographic chamber fell silent as Dr. Cassandra's research appeared on the central display. Genetic sequences, protein structures, and evolutionary analyses painted a picture that made even veteran military commanders shift uncomfortably in their seats. Dr. Cassandra's analysis confirms our worst fears. Admiral Thexara continued. Humans carry predecessor genetic markers. Either they are direct descendants of our ancient enemy, or they have been genetically modified by predecessor technology. General Vorth's massive frame leaned forward. Explain to me how this is possible. The predecessor war ended 3 millennia ago. We destroyed their ships, scattered their forces, drove them from every known system. That's what we believed. Director Kessex's shadowy form interjected. But the predecessors were masters of genetic manipulation and consciousness transfer. What if they didn't flee? What if they hid? The implications rippled through the assembled leaders like a shockwave. Ambassador Kethlon spoke first. You're suggesting they've been on Earth all this time? That they've been, what, breeding? Preparing? Or worse, Admiral Thexara replied grimly. The human genetic patterns show dormant sequences that could theoretically be activated. What if the predecessors didn't just hide? What if they transformed themselves into humans and have been waiting for the right moment to reclaim their true nature? That's impossible, protested General Morthek of the Reptilian Defense Force. We've interacted with hundreds of humans over the past months. They show no signs of advanced technological knowledge or predecessor capabilities, don't they? Admiral Thexara manipulated the display to show footage from the Academy combat incident. Watch this again and tell me what you see. The recording played, showing Marcus Chen's dismantling of 3 Corellian warriors with surgical precision. But now, viewed through the lens of their new knowledge, his movements took on a different quality. Notice the pattern recognition. Dr. Cassandra's voice narrated over the footage. He identifies vulnerabilities in alien physiology within seconds. His movement efficiency suggests deep understanding of biological systems across multiple species. This isn't just advanced combat training. It's the kind of instinctive knowledge that should take years of study to acquire. Or genetic memory, Director Kessex added darkly. Inherited knowledge from predecessor scientists who spent centuries studying Alliance species. The chamber erupted in discussion until Admiral Thexara called for order. The question before us is clear. How do we respond to this threat? Simple, General Vorth declared. We arrest all human personnel immediately and quarantine Earth until we can develop countermeasures. And if we're wrong? Ambassador Kethlon asked. If humans are genuinely peaceful refugees seeking alliance, we would be condemning an innocent species based on ancient genetics they may not even understand. The risk is too great, General Morthek countered. If even a fraction of humans possessed dormant predecessor capabilities, they could cripple our defenses before we knew what hit us. Admiral Thexara raised one crystalline appendage for silence. There's another factor to consider. Our intelligence suggests that humans have been in contact with Alliance monitoring stations for the past 72 hours. Every representative in the chamber froze. Explain, Director Kessex commanded. Encrypted transmissions between Earth and our deep space surveillance network. The communications are using quantum encryption methods that shouldn't be available to their stated technology level. General Vorth's armored fist struck the table. They're coordinating with assets we don't know about. This confirms it. Their predecessor agents preparing for activation. But Ambassador Kethlon looked thoughtful. Or they're trying to warn us about something. Warn us about what? I don't know. But consider this. If humans were predecessor sleeper agents, why would they reveal their capabilities so obviously? Why allow us to analyze their genetics? Why demonstrate combat skills that would inevitably draw suspicion? Admiral Thexara's form shifted to contemplative blue. You think they want us to discover the truth? Maybe they need us to know. Maybe whatever they're preparing for is bigger than old grudges between species. Director Kessex's shadow seemed to deepen. Our surveillance network has detected unusual energy signatures at the edge of the galaxy. Massive objects moving faster than anything in our technology databases. The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. How massive? Admiral Thexara's voice carried new urgency. Planet-sized. Moving in formation. And they're heading directly toward Alliance space. General Vorth's expression shifted from anger to grim calculation. ETA? At current speed? 18 months. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. Whatever was approaching possessed technology that exceeded Alliance capabilities by orders of magnitude. Traditional defensive strategies would be useless. This changes everything, Admiral Thexara said finally. If humans are preparing for this threat, then maybe we've been looking at this backwards, Ambassador Cathalon finished. Maybe they're not the enemy returning. Maybe they're the weapon the predecessors left behind to fight something worse. Dr. Cassandra activated her communicator. Admiral, I'm receiving an urgent transmission from the Academy. It's from Cadet Chen. Put it through. Marcus Chen's image appeared in the holographic display, his expression serious but calm. Admiral Thexara, Dr. Cassandra, esteemed members of the Defense Council, I believe it's time we had an honest conversation. The humans' knowledge of their secret meeting sent alarm through the chamber, but Admiral Thexara gestured for calm. Proceed, Cadet. My real name is Captain Marcus Chen, Advanced Reconnaissance Specialist for the Terran Defense Coalition. I'm not here as a student. I'm here as an early warning system. Warning of what? General Vorth demanded. Marcus's expression grew grim. The Devourers are coming. The same enemy that forced the predecessors to modify our genetics 3,000 years ago. The enemy that's been consuming galaxies across the universe while we developed the capabilities to fight them. The predecessors didn't disappear, Marcus continued. They sacrificed themselves to give humanity the tools we'd need when the Devourers found us again. Every human carries dormant capabilities that activate under extreme stress. We're living weapons designed for one purpose, to stop an enemy that consumes entire civilizations. Admiral Thexara's form shifted through multiple color spectrums. And Earth's recent military activity? Final preparations. Training exercises for the war that's about to begin. We've been developing tactics and technology specifically designed to fight entities that can devour planets. Why the deception? Why not approach us directly? Marcus's smile held no humor. Because every species that learned about the Devourers either fled or went insane from the knowledge. The predecessors discovered that the only way to prepare for this war was to hide the truth until the moment it became unavoidable. And that moment is now, Director Kessex said, understanding. The Devourers' advanced scouts entered this galaxy 6 months ago. They've been probing our defenses, testing our capabilities. The planet-sized objects your sensors detected? Those are just the vanguard. The chamber fell silent as the magnitude of the revelation sank in. How do we fight something like that? General Morthic asked. Together, Marcus replied simply. Human capabilities combined with Alliance technology and tactics. The predecessors designed us to be effective against the Devourers. But we can't win alone. We need every species, every world, every resource the Alliance can muster. Admiral Thexara's crystalline form had shifted to determined silver. Captain Chen, what do you need from us? Time, resources, and trust. We have 18 months to prepare for a war unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. 18 months to transform 200 billion individual beings into a unified fighting force, capable of stopping the consumption of our entire civilization. And if we fail? Marcus's expression grew distant, and for a moment, the weight of inherited memory showed in his eyes. The genetic knowledge of a species that had been shaped by war for 3 millennia. If we fail, the Devourers add another galaxy to their collection, and the cycle continues. But we won't fail. Humans were designed not to fail. As the emergency session continued, plans began to form. Ancient enemies would become allies. Impossible technologies would be developed. And a galaxy would prepare for the war that would determine the fate of all life in the universe. In the depths of space, the Devourers continued their inexorable approach, unaware that their ancient prey had spent 3,000 years preparing for this moment. The final battle was coming, and humanity was ready.